The following program is recommended for mature individuals and may contain material unsuitable for morons, cretins, and dishwipes. If you are a moron or a member of the PTL Club, please turn off your radio, because we don't need any more stupid, narrow-minded, pencil-neck geeks who wouldn't know the First Amendment if it came up and bit them on the butt. Thank you.
Hi, this is Mike Fry, and you are listening to the We Fucking Told You So podcast. Today is March 7, 2025, and today's installment is MAGA's Reptile Brain. How you can tell that MAGA folks primarily use their basal ganglia and little other brain function. But before we get into today's topic, we have to first do a quick follow-up on our last blog and podcast about the white supremacist militia groups with ties to our current administration that burned down a huge part of our neighborhood following the killing of an innocent black man named George Floyd by a Minneapolis police officer named Derek Chauvin. Chauvin kneeled on Floyd's neck for 9 minutes and 29 seconds after Floyd said he couldn't breathe, and while onlookers recorded video of Floyd being strangled to death as Chauvin mugged for the camera. If you've not read that blog or listened to the podcast, put that in your queue after you finish this one. It connects some important dots between those events and our current administration that too few people are connecting. After we published it, as if to prove us right and without any hint of irony, this week Elon Musk and a group of Republicans began calling on Felon 47, aka Number 3, to pardon Chauvin, which is as stupid as it is repugnant as it is telling. Chauvin is currently in a federal prison serving 2 concurrent prison sentences of 22 years for the murder that we all watched him commit with our own eyes. It should also be pointed out that before going to jail, he was a member of at least one white supremacy group that was connected to the arson and terrorism that they brought in the aftermath of George Floyd's killing. So the dots connecting these white supremacy groups to our current administration actually go full circle through this murder and the terrorism that followed. Naturally, the administration can't pardon Chauvin for his state conviction, and since he's serving his terms concurrently, doing so wouldn't change how much time he spends in jail. It would only require he be moved from federal prison, where he is now, to state prison, most likely Stillwater State Penitentiary, where Chauvin clearly doesn't want to be. He was in fact moved from there for his own safety. So yeah, the idea of pardoning him is as telling as it is repugnant, as it is stupid, which, funny enough, brings us right to today's topic of reptiles and Republicans who act and think just like them. Don't get us wrong, we love reptiles. We've shared our lives with many of them. Arboreal, aquatic, desert, and rainforest reptiles have filled a significant part of our lives, as we've shared our homes with countless of them, far too many to list. But one that comes to mind is Gilbert, a 6 to 7 foot long giant green iguana who had full run of our home for many years. He was house trained, and so long as we took steps to accommodate his reptile brain, he was relatively easy to live with, so long as we didn't trigger any of his fight instincts. If we did, we would end up with a large welt across our chest or face from a hard defensive whip of his long, strong tail. The pinky finger on my right hand is pretty crooked after getting a severe bite on my hand, which ended up breaking multiple bones in my smallest digit. There was also Spiny, a spiny-tailed iguana that we live-trapped in the parking lot of a podiatrist's office in Golden Valley, Minnesota. A concerned patient of the doctor had seen the lizard coming and going from a hole in a retaining wall, knew the lizard was not native to Minnesota, and that the lizard would never survive a Minnesota winter. The patient also knew of our work with reptiles, so called to see if we could help. The iguana was easy to catch in a trap baited with fresh, irresistible melon. We drizzled a trail of melon juice from the hole where she was living to the live trap that was nearby. Almost as soon as we had it set, she came out of her hole, tongue repeatedly sampling the trail of melon juice. As soon as she saw the melons, we knew we had her. We were watching from our car just 10 feet away. She was the feistiest creature we've ever kept, which says a lot, given that the first addition we put on our home was joyfully labeled the Lizard Room by the architects who designed it. The Lizard Room was soon followed on the construction schedule by the Lizard Solarium and the Lizard Porch. Many reptiles lived in each of those spaces over a dozen years, which does not even count all the scaly creatures with whom we worked in our professional lives outside of our home. We say all of that only to emphasize that when we talk about the MAGA reptile brain, we have a lot of experience interacting with actual reptile brains. And we also don't really mean it as the kind of insult in the way people may interpret such a statement. Reptiles are far more interesting and complex than many realize. As said earlier, Gilbert, our iguana, that had full run of the house, was house-trained and peacefully coexisted with our dogs and cats. At the same time, reptiles are clearly not big thinkers. They have the most primitive of vertebrate animal brains. Their entire brains are comparable to our basal ganglia, which is a small part of our brain located deep inside, down at the brainstem. A perfect demonstration of the reptile brain at work happened one day when a friend gave me the gift of a soft plush toy iguana, a smaller cartoon version of Gilbert. Gilbert's reaction to the gift was as funny as it was predictable. It seemed to him to be an intruder and therefore a threat. He climbed the shelf on which I had put the toy, pounced, grabbed it in his jaws by the back of the neck and shook it hard. He then dragged it over to the large water basin that he used for soaking and drinking, put the toy's head under water, and wouldn't let me touch it until he was sure it was dead. Gilbert's reptile brain simply could not grasp the concept that something that looked kind of like an iguana wasn't an actual iguana. The stuffed toy was not a real iguana, was no threat, but Gilbert's reptile brain could not draw any distinctions. By the same token, to a MAGA supporter, it was like the words woke or trans or DEI, words they're woefully inept at defining, much less understanding. While they certainly can't define the word woke, MAGA supporters' basal ganglia is triggered quite effectively by it, that primitive reptilian part of our own brains constantly on the alert for threats. After they've sat and listened to Fox so-called news, OAN, or right-wing podcasts for countless years, as the vacuous talking heads there scream about the dangers of wokeness that are destroying the entirety of the world. Be afraid, be afraid. The same is true on many topics. On immigrants, be afraid. They're poisoning the blood of the USA. They're eating the dogs and cats in Springfield, Ohio. They're eating the pets of the people who live there. They are murderers, rapists, and drug dealers stealing our jobs. Be afraid, be afraid. On Social Security, it's a Ponzi scheme that's bankrupting our nation. Be afraid, be afraid. Never mind that Social Security is actually just people getting back the money they paid in during a lifetime of working so that they'll have some comfort in their old age or after unplanned disability. Also, never mind that if wealthy people paid it in at the same rate as the rest of us, it would be solvent indefinitely. Never mind any of that. Instead, be afraid, be afraid. The right-wing talking points are all various kinds of fear-mongering designed specifically to trigger the reptilian brain in their followers, which is why so much of the rhetoric is all about things to hate or to be fearful of. The things that they're for are unpopular, even amongst their own supporters, so they can't really talk about wanting tax cuts for Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and their friends. So instead, they direct their followers' attention at plush cartoon toy iguanas and convince them that they are intruders trying to take over their territories. And like Gilbert, they get their tails up and start swinging, oftentimes in a great display of masculine dominance. To be clear, all humans have this reptile part of our brains that is often triggered by irrational fears. What's supposed to separate us from actual reptiles are the higher lobes in our brains, like our cerebral cortex, where consciousness and rational thought happens, where we can give the reptile brain an important reality check. A functional cerebral cortex would allow a person who was told, "Be afraid of migrants because they're eating dogs and cats," to cross-check that report with the fact that the pet that triggered the statement was not only not eaten by anyone, but was found alive, hiding in the owner's basement. A person with that kind of functioning cerebral cortex would then maybe stop listening to those telling them lies about people eating pets that are still alive. When the higher functioning lobes do not give reality checks to the reptilian part of our brains, we pretty much end up right where Gilbert stayed in his relationship to that toy. No matter how long the stuffed iguana stayed in our house, it was always a life-threatening intruder in Gilbert's eyes. As much as we loved Gilbert, we would certainly never trust him to make decisions about the rules around our house. Neither should we trust the humans running on their reptilian brains to make decisions about the fate of our nation and world, particularly when there are nefarious people pushing their MAGA base's reptilian buttons to accomplish cruel or corrupt goals of global consequence. So the next time you find yourself talking to a MAGA supporter and not even the tiniest little bit of logic can get through, just remember, we fucking told you so. They're thinking like reptiles. You have been listening to the We Fucking Told You So podcast. Please like and subscribe and share on your social media. Thanks for listening.